I was there lying in that hospital bed, pretending to sleep while I listened to my daughter Sarah talking with the doctor in the hallway. The words that came out of her mouth hit me like a lightning bolt. "Doctor, honestly, if it was God's will for her to go now, it would be a relief for all of us." My heart shattered in that moment, but I kept my eyes closed, controlling every muscle in my face so I wouldn't show that I had heard everything. Sarah kept talking quietly, but I could hear every poisonous word she directed at me, her own mother who had dedicated her entire life to raising her. There I was, Grace Miller, 73 years old, hospitalized for a week with pneumonia that left me very weak, discovering that my only daughter considered me too heavy a burden to carry. During all these years, ever since my husband Michael passed, I lived in Sarah's house with her husband Charles, always trying to help in any way I could, taking care of the grandchildren, doing chores, contributing my pension to the household expenses. I truly believed I was welcome, that I was part of that family, that my presence was valued and necessary. The conversation in the hallway continued, and Sarah talked about how it would be easier for her and Charles if I were no longer disturbing their routine, how the grandchildren were growing up and no longer needed a grandmother around, how the room I occupied could be turned into a home office for Charles to work from home. Every word was like a stone being thrown at my chest, breaking little by little all the illusions I had about my daughter's love. The doctor tried to explain that I was recovering well and would soon be discharged. But Sarah seemed disappointed with that news, sighing in a way that made it clear my improvement was not a cause for celebration for her. In that moment, still pretending to be asleep, I made a decision that would change everything forever. If Sarah wanted me to disappear from her life, if I was truly a weight she could no longer bear, then I would do exactly what she wished, but she would discover in the most painful way possible that some things in life cannot be undone, and that underestimating the one who always loved you has a very high price to pay. What Sarah didn't know was that I still had some resources saved up, some surprises she would never imagine, and that her useless mother was about to show that she still had a lot of control over her own life. Throughout my youth, I worked as a seamstress in a textile factory in Denver, getting up every day at 5 in the morning to be on time. My husband Michael worked in construction, and together we managed to buy our little house in a humble but decent neighborhood. When Sarah was born, I decided to leave the factory job to dedicate myself completely to raising her. Michael supported me in that decision, even if it meant living with fewer financial resources. We wanted to give our daughter all the love and attention she deserved, even if it meant making personal sacrifices. The first few years were financially difficult, but we were a happy family. Michael would come home tired from work, but he always had energy to play with Sarah, to help her with her homework, to teach her values of respect and responsibility. I took care of the house, cooking, taking Sarah to school, participating in parent-teacher meetings. We were a team, Michael and I, working together to give our daughter the best opportunities within our reach. When Sarah turned 15, we decided to throw a memorable Sweet 16 party for her. We had been saving for 2 years to afford everything: the dress, the music, the food, the decorations. Michael worked extra shifts for months, and I went back to sewing in the afternoons for other families in the neighborhood, earning extra money. It was all worth it to see the happy smile on Sarah's face when she saw the hall decorated especially for her. That night, dancing with her father, she told us we were the best parents in the world and that she felt like the luckiest girl in all of Denver. The high school years brought new challenges. Sarah wanted to study business administration at the university, an expensive career that would require many sacrifices on our part. Michael and I talked for a long time about how we could make it happen. We decided to sell some of the furniture in the house. Michael got a second job on weekends, and I went back to working full-time as a seamstress. For 3 years we lived with the bare minimum, but we managed to pay for every semester of Sarah's degree. Every time she got good grades, we felt all our sacrifices were worthwhile. When Sarah graduated from college, it was one of the happiest days of our lives. She got a good job at an important company in the city, and soon after she met Charles, a young accountant who seemed responsible and hardworking. When she introduced us to Charles Michael, and I welcomed them with open arms. He seemed like a decent, respectful young man with serious plans for the future. When they decided to get married, we supported them completely, even helping financially with the wedding and the honeymoon. The first years of Sarah's marriage were calm. She and Charles lived in a small but comfortable apartment, and we visited them regularly on Sundays for lunch together. When my grandchildren Hannah and Robert were born, my happiness was complete. I finally had the big family I had always dreamed of. I spent entire afternoons taking care of the babies, allowing Sarah and Charles to have time to rest or go out alone. I was a new grandmother and enjoyed every moment with those little angels who filled my life with renewed joy. Everything changed when Michael became ill with his heart. The last 2 years of his life were very difficult for the whole family. The medical consultations, the medications, the hospitalizations, everything was very expensive, and our savings ran out quickly. Sarah helped us financially as much as she could, but she also had her own responsibilities with her young children. Michael passed away one spring afternoon, peacefully holding my hand and telling me he had been happy with me, that I should take good care of Sarah and the grandchildren. After the funeral, I was left alone in our little house, not really knowing how to go on with my life. During the first few months after Michael's passing, I tried to maintain my independence. I continued to collect my pension, kept the house clean and tidy, and had my grandchildren over on weekends. But the nights were long and lonely, and little by little I began to feel the weight of age and sadness. Sarah worried about me. She came to visit me often, took me shopping, and accompanied me to medical appointments. It was during one of those visits that she suggested the possibility of me moving in with her and Charles. "Mom," she told me, "you don't have to be alone anymore. There's enough space at home, and you'd be close to the grandchildren. Besides, you'd help us a lot by taking care of them while Charles and I work." The proposal excited me very much. The idea of being an active part of my grandchildren's daily lives, of not being alone at night, of feeling useful and needed again, filled me with hope. I accepted without hesitation. We sold my little house, and with that money, I helped Sarah and Charles make the down payment on a bigger house in a better neighborhood. It seemed like the perfect arrangement for everyone. I would have company and purpose, they would have help with the children and household chores, and the grandchildren would have their grandmother always available for them. The first 2 years of living together were really good. I got up early to prepare breakfast for the family, took Hannah and Robert to school, and kept the house tidy while Sarah and Charles worked. In the afternoons, I helped the grandchildren with their homework, and at night I cooked family dinners that we all enjoyed together. I felt like an integral and valued part of that family. I contributed my pension to the household expenses, but I also contributed my work, my care, my unconditional love. Gradually, things began to change. Hannah and Robert grew up and started spending more time with their friends than with the family. Sarah was promoted at her job and came home later more stressed, less patient. Charles also seemed more distant, more preoccupied with his own work projects. Little by little, my help began to be seen more as something expected than something appreciated. The chores I did were no longer met with gratitude, but were taken for granted. When the grandchildren no longer needed so much supervision, my presence began to be less necessary and apparently more bothersome. The subtle comments started about my age, about my limitations, about how certain things I did were no longer as efficient as before. Sarah would tell me I didn't need to get up so early to make breakfast, that they could manage on their own. Charles would comment that it was no longer necessary for me to take the grandchildren to school, that they could take the school bus. Gradually, they took away my responsibilities, but they also took away my purpose and relevance in that house I had helped buy. Family conversations began to unfold as if I wasn't present. They talked about future plans, vacations, remodeling projects, without including me in the decisions. When I tried to give an opinion or make suggestions, I received condescending smiles and answers that made me feel like a child who had spoken out of turn. My life experience, my advice based on years of marriage and motherhood, was no longer valued. I was simply the grandmother who lived in the house, not an active and respected member of the family. The last few months before my hospitalization were especially difficult. Sarah had started making comments about how it would be convenient for me to have my own space, some place where I could be comfortable without worrying about household responsibilities. She talked about senior living homes as if they were wonderful places where I could make friends my age and participate in activities designed especially for me. Every time she brought up the subject, I changed the conversation because I didn't want to face the reality that I was no longer welcome in the home I had helped create. And now, lying in this hospital bed, hearing my own daughter say it would be a relief if I passed away forever, I finally understood that all those months of hints had been preparation for this moment. Sarah had already made the decision to get rid of me. She was just waiting for the right opportunity, and my illness seemed like the perfect excuse. But what she didn't know was that her mother, frail and defenseless, still had some resources saved up, some plans she would never imagine. When the doctor left and Sarah entered the room to visit me, I kept my eyes closed and regulated my breathing to appear deeply asleep. She approached my bed, observed me for a few moments, and then whispered something that chilled my blood. "It's time, Mom. You've served your time on this earth. Now you can rest in peace." Those words confirmed all my suspicions. My own daughter was wishing for my death, hoping this illness would take me so she could continue with her life without the bother of caring for an elderly mother. In that moment, I made the most important decision of my 73 years of life. If Sarah wanted me to disappear, I would, but not in the way she expected. I was going to disappear from her life, but alive, independent, and in full control of my own resources. I was going to teach my ungrateful daughter that underestimating the one who gave you life has consequences she had never imagined. The woman who had dedicated her entire existence to caring for and protecting her family was about to transform into someone completely different. Someone who would no longer accept crumbs of love from those who should love her unconditionally. That night, alone in my hospital room, I began to make plans that would change everything forever. During the following days in the hospital, I pretended to remain weaker than I really was, observing every visit from Sarah with completely different eyes. She came to see me every day, but now I perceived the disguised impatience in her gestures, the rush to leave, the way she avoided my gaze when I tried to talk about simple day-to-day matters. During one of those visits when she was checking her phone while I talked about how bad the hospital food was, I remembered how different things were when she was a child and depended completely on me. I remembered all the sleepless nights when Sarah was sick, how I worked 2 jobs to pay for her studies, how I gave up remarrying to dedicate myself completely to my daughter's education. I remembered when she married Charles and they were having financial difficulties in the early years, and I used all my savings to help them with the down payment on the house where we live today. I remembered how I took care of my grandchildren when they were babies, how many times I woke up in the middle of the night to change diapers and give bottles, allowing Sarah and Charles to sleep peacefully. All those memories caused a deep pain in my chest, but they also awakened a strength in me that I didn't know still existed. For the last 5 years, since I went to live with them, I had gotten used to being treated like a permanent guest in the house I myself had helped buy. I was always careful not to bother, always tried to be useful without being inconvenient, always put their needs before my own. But now I understood that all that care and dedication had been interpreted as an obligation, as if I owed eternal gratitude for having a place to live. That night alone in the hospital room, I began to make plans that Sarah would never imagine I was capable of making. I picked up the hospital phone and made some very important calls, conversations I hadn't had the courage to have before, but which now became absolutely necessary. I called my lawyer, Mr. Robert Miller, an old family friend who had always offered to help me with legal matters, but whom I never sought out because I thought I didn't need him. In that conversation, I discovered that I had many more rights and resources than I imagined, and that some decisions I had made years ago could be easily reversed. "Mrs. Grace," Mr. Miller said with a concerned voice, "I'm very happy to hear from you, although I'm worried you're calling from the hospital." "How is your health?" I briefly explained about my pneumonia and my recovery, but I quickly got to the point that really mattered to me. "Sir, I need to ask you a very important question about the house where I live with my daughter. When I sold my property to help them with the down payment, under whose name was the new house registered?" There was a silence on the other end of the line before the lawyer answered. Mrs. Grace, if I recall correctly, you insisted that the house be registered under your name as a way to protect your investment. Your daughter Sarah and your son-in-law appear as co-owners, but you are the primary owner. Why do you ask, is there a problem? My heart began to beat faster when I heard those words. I had completely forgotten that on Mr. Miller's advice, we had structured the purchase that way to protect my financial contribution. At the time, it seemed like just an unimportant legal detail, but now it became the most powerful tool I could have. Sir, I need you to explain exactly what my rights are as the primary owner of that house. For the next 20 minutes, Mr. Miller explained my legal situation in detail. As the primary owner, I had the right to make decisions about the property, including the possibility of selling it, renting it, or asking the co-owners to vacate if I considered there were justified reasons. He also explained that my monthly pension contribution to the family expenses was completely voluntary and that I could stop it at any time without any legal consequences. But, sir, I asked with a trembling voice, what would happen if I decided I want to live alone again? Could I ask them to find another place to live? His answer left me breathless. Mrs. Grace, legally, you have every right to reclaim exclusive use of your property. We would have to give them a 30-day notice, but yes, it is completely possible. That conversation changed everything. Something inside me had broken definitively during those days in the hospital. But at the same time, a woman I didn't know was being born someone who would no longer accept being treated like a dead weight in her own children's lives. After hanging up with Mr. Miller, I stayed awake all night planning every detail of what I would have to do once I left the hospital. The next day, when Sarah came to visit me, I observed her with a new perspective. She arrived with her fake, concerned face, brought me some cheap flowers from the stall outside the hospital, and sat in the chair next to my bed with the same expression of impatience I had learned to recognize. "How are you feeling today, Mom? Did the doctor tell you when you're being discharged?" I feigned weakness and told her I still felt very tired, that I would probably need several more days of rest before I could go home. What I didn't tell her was that I was using that time to make more phone calls and organize all the details of my new independent life. During her visit, Sarah told me about how she had been reorganizing my room at home, how she had put away some of my things to make more space, how she thought it would be good to consider some specialized care options for when I left the hospital. "Mom," she told me with that condescending voice she had developed in recent months, "I've been researching some very nice places where people your age can live with all the comforts and medical care they need. They're like luxury hotels with activities company of people your own age nurses available 24 hours. Don't you think it would be wonderful not to have to worry about anything?" I nodded weakly and told her I would think about it, but inside I was boiling with indignation. My own daughter was planning to put me in a nursing home while I was hospitalized without even really consulting me, simply informing me of a decision she had apparently already made. When she left that afternoon, I immediately dialed Mr. Miller again to speed up all the processes we had discussed. Over the next 2 days, while I continued to pretend to be sicker than I really was, Mr. Miller worked quietly to prepare all the legal documentation I would need. He also helped me contact a real estate agency to look for a small but comfortable apartment where I could live independently. It was incredible how in just a few days my entire perspective on my life had changed. The submissive woman who accepted everything silently was transforming into someone with concrete plans and her own resources. The third night after my conversation with Mr. Miller, I received an unexpected visit. My grandchildren Hannah and Robert arrived with Charles, carrying balloons and a homemade card. For a moment my heart almost wavered. Hannah, 15, hugged me with tears in her eyes and told me, "Grandma, I missed you so much. The house isn't the same without you." Robert, 12, proudly showed me the card he had made full of drawings and messages of love. While I talked with my grandchildren, I observed Charles carefully. He seemed genuinely concerned about my health, but I also noticed something in his behavior that I hadn't perceived before. He talked about future plans for the house, about remodeling projects, about changes they wanted to make in the coming months. It all sounded as if they had already decided I wouldn't be there to see those changes. When Hannah asked when I would be home, Charles exchanged a significant look with Robert before answering, Well, your grandmother needs to recover completely, and maybe it's better for her to have a quieter place where she can rest." That night after they left, I called my younger sister Rose, who lives in Chicago. We hadn't spoken in several months, but we always maintained a close relationship despite the distance. When I told her what I had heard in the hospital and what I was planning to do, her reaction surprised me. "Grace," she told me with a firm voice, "it's about time you opened your eyes. Ever since I last visited you 6 months ago, I noticed how they were treating you. Sarah barely spoke to you during my visit. Charles talked to you as if you were a maid, and you seemed like a shadow of the strong woman you always were. It hurt me a lot to see that, but I knew you had to realize it for yourself." Rose offered to have me come live with her in Chicago, but I had already made the decision to stay in Denver. This was my city. Here were my memories with Michael. Here I had built my whole life. I wasn't going to let Sarah force me to flee my own home. "Rose," I told her, "I'm going to get my dignity back right here in this city where I've lived my whole life. If Sarah wants to get rid of me, she's going to find out that her mother still has a lot of power over her own decisions." During my last night in the hospital, I organized all the final details of my plan. Mr. Miller had found a perfect apartment for me, a small but very comfortable place in a quiet neighborhood near the city center with good access to public transport and medical services nearby. The building had 24-hour security and several neighbors my age who could become pleasant company. I had also organized the financial aspects of my new independence. My pension was enough to cover the apartment rent and my basic expenses, especially considering I would no longer be contributing to the expenses of Sarah's house. Mr. Miller explained that I could suspend that contribution immediately as it was completely voluntary. Furthermore, I had decided to withdraw my savings from the joint bank account I had with Sarah, money I had been saving for family emergencies, but which I would now need for my new independent life. The morning of my discharge from the hospital, Sarah arrived with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She brought a suitcase with clean clothes for me and spoke with feigned enthusiasm about how happy she would be to have me back home. During the taxi ride, she told me about all the things she had organized for my comfort. She had bought some medicines the doctor recommended, prepared soft meals for my recovery, and arranged my room to have better ventilation. What hurt me most was the way she talked about my future as if it were already decided without my participation. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about your well-being. I think after this illness, it's important that we seriously consider some more specialized care options. Not because we don't want you at home, but because we want what's best for you. Places where you have constant company activities appropriate for your age, immediate medical care if you need it." Every word confirmed my suspicions. Sarah had already decided to put me in a nursing home. She was just looking for the gentlest way to tell me. She probably thought that after my illness, I would be more vulnerable, more willing to accept what she considered best for me. What she didn't know was that her frail mother had been using those days in the hospital to plan the biggest surprise of her life. When we arrived at the house, I was greeted by Hannah and Robert with genuine hugs of joy. For a moment, my heart almost wavered seeing the sincere happiness on their faces. Hannah helped me to my room, fixed my pillows, and brought me a glass of fresh water. Robert showed me the drawings he had made for me while I was in the hospital. These grandchildren truly loved me. And for a second, I wondered if I was being unfair to them because of their mother's mistakes. But then Charles appeared, and after a quick hug and a "good to have you back," he immediately started talking about how they needed to reorganize the spaces in the house, how it would be important for me to understand that now, with my advanced age and delicate health, it might be safer to consider other housing options, places with more medical structure and specialized care. During the next 3 days, I acted as if nothing had changed, maintaining my normal routine of helping with household chores, caring for the grandchildren, contributing to family activities. But behind that apparent normalcy, I was executing a plan that had been carefully crafted during my hospital stay. Mr. Miller was working quietly to prepare all the legal documents necessary to regain full control of my house and my finances. The most revealing moment came when I found Sarah going through my personal documents in my room, claiming she was organizing my papers to help me with bureaucratic matters. She had in her hands my will, my bank statements, the house papers, all the important documents of my life. When she saw me arrive, she tried to act natural, but the guilt was evident on her face. "Mom," she said, trying to sound casual, "I was just organizing your important papers. I think it would be good for me to have copies of everything, in case you ever need help with paperwork or medical emergencies. At your age, it's important that someone trustworthy handles these matters for you." In that instant, I understood that she was already planning to take total control of my life, probably preparing the ground for some kind of guardianship or legal incapacitation. She had been researching my financial resources, evaluating my properties, organizing everything to make decisions for me without my consent. The mask of the concerned daughter had fallen completely, and now I could clearly see her true intentions. That night, I called Mr. Miller and told him we needed to accelerate all the processes that were underway. I explained what I had discovered about Sarah's plans, and he confirmed that it was crucial to act quickly before she could initiate any legal process to limit my autonomy. "Mrs. Grace," he told me, "everything is ready. Tomorrow we can sign all the necessary documents. The apartment is available, your finances are organized, and legally, you have every right to regain your independence." During my last night in that house, I stayed awake looking out my bedroom window, remembering all the happy moments I had lived there with my grandchildren, but also all the moments of humiliation and contempt I had suffered in recent months. It was the end of one stage of my life, but also the beginning of something new, an opportunity to show that Grace Miller still had a lot of control over her own destiny. The next morning, while Sarah took the children to school and Charles left for work, I put my final plan into action. It was time for my daughter to discover that she had completely underestimated her mother and that the consequences of her actions would be much more severe than she had ever imagined. The morning that would change everything forever dawned calm and sunny in Denver. Sarah got up as usual, prepared breakfast for the children, and got ready to take them to school before going to work. Charles left early for an important meeting at his office. The family routine unfolded exactly as it did every day for the last 5 years, but this time I knew it would be the last time I would see them act as if I were invisible in my own home. While we ate breakfast together, I observed every detail of that scene that would be repeated for the last time. Hannah talked about a math test she had that afternoon. Robert complained that he couldn't find his history book. Charles checked his phone while drinking coffee. Sarah organized the children's lunchboxes with mechanical movements. Everyone was there, but no one really saw me. It was as if I were just another piece of kitchen furniture present, but irrelevant to their lives. "Mom," Sarah said to me as she collected the breakfast dishes, "I'm going to be a little late today because I have an appointment with the director of a very nice place I want you to see. It's a specialized residence for seniors with beautiful gardens and very entertaining activities. I think you're going to love it." Her words sounded sweet, but I already knew it wasn't an invitation, but a notification of a decision she had already made for me. I nodded gently, and I told her that would be fine, that I would rest at home during the day. What I didn't tell her was that it would indeed be a day of rest, but not in the way she imagined. It would be the first day of the rest of my life, the day Grace Miller would stop being a victim and become the protagonist of her own story. After everyone left, I was alone in that house I had helped buy, looking at every corner with a mixture of nostalgia and determination. I walked through the living room where I had spent so many afternoons watching television with my grandchildren, through the kitchen where I had prepared thousands of family meals, through the small garden where I had cultivated the plants I loved so much. All of that had been my life for 5 years, but now I understood that it had never really been my home. It had only been the place where they allowed me to stay as long as I was useful and didn't cause trouble. At 9 a.m. sharp, just as we had agreed, Mr. Miller arrived at the house accompanied by his secretary and 2 witnesses. He brought with him all the legal documentation we had prepared during my hospital stay. The bank account transfer papers, the legal eviction notice for Sarah and Charles, the documents confirming my exclusive right to the property, and the contracts for the apartment that would be my new home. Mrs. Grace, the lawyer told me with a professional but understanding smile, are you completely sure you want to proceed with all these changes? Once we sign these documents and deliver the legal notifications, there will be no turning back. Your daughter and son-in-law will have 30 days to vacate the property. For a moment, my heart wavered. I thought about Hannah and Robert, about how they would feel when they discovered their grandmother had kicked them out of the house. I thought about all the years I had lived with them, the happy moments we had shared, the possibility that maybe I was overreacting to the cruel words I had heard in the hospital. But then I remembered the conversation I had overheard in the hospital hallway. Sarah's words wishing I would die so it would be a relief for everyone. I remembered finding her going through my personal documents planning to take control of my life without my consent. I remembered all the months of hints about nursing homes and senior residences, all the comments about my age limitations, all the times they had made me feel like a heavy burden instead of a valued member of the family. Mr. Miller, I said, with a voice firmer than I had used in months, I am completely sure. My daughter decided I was an obstacle in her life, and now she is going to discover the consequences of treating her mother as if she were disposable. Proceed with all the documents. For the next 2 hours, I signed papers that would change everything forever. First, the documents that transferred all my joint bank accounts with Sarah to individual accounts under my exclusive name. This included my emergency savings, which amounted to a considerable sum I had been saving for years to help the family in case of need. Now that money would be exclusively for my new independent life. Then I signed the documents that confirmed my exclusive right to the house. Although Sarah and Charles appeared as co-owners on the original papers, my initial financial contribution and my status as the primary owner gave me the legal right to reclaim exclusive use of the property. Mr. Miller explained that this was completely legal, especially considering I had been the person who put down the money for the initial down payment. The most important document was the legal eviction notice that we would have to deliver to Sarah and Charles. This paper gave them exactly 30 days to find another place to live and completely vacate the property. The lawyer assured me that everything was done according to the law, that there was no way they could legally challenge my decision. I also signed the lease agreements for my new apartment, a small but cozy place in the Washington Park neighborhood, a quiet and safe area of Denver with excellent public transport and medical services nearby. The apartment had 1 bedroom, a living dining room, a functional kitchenette, and a small balcony overlooking a park. It was exactly what I needed to start my independent life over. As we organized all the documents, Mr. Miller gave me some practical advice about my new situation. Mrs. Grace, it's important you understand that your daughter will probably try to convince you to change your mind. She will use emotional arguments. She will promise that things will be different. She will try to make you feel guilty for your decision. You have to be prepared to stand firm in your resolution. He also explained my rights as an independent senior citizen. No one can force you to live in a place you don't want to. No one can make medical decisions for you as long as you are mentally and physically capable. And no one can access your financial resources without your express authorization. If your daughter tries to initiate any legal process to declare you incapacitated, we have all the necessary medical documentation to prove that you are in full possession of your faculties. After Mr. Miller left, I was left alone in the house for the last time, as the woman who had accepted being treated like a burden. I walked slowly through each room, remembering the happy moments, but also the painful moments I had lived there. In the living room, I remembered the afternoons I had tried to talk to Sarah about my day, only to be ignored while she checked her phone. In the kitchen, I remembered the times I had cooked special meals for the family, only to hear comments about how the food was too salty or too spicy for their modern tastes. In my room, I opened the closet and began to pack my personal belongings. I didn't need much, just essential clothes, some family photographs, the books I liked best, and a few objects that had sentimental value. Everything else could stay in the house. I wasn't fleeing like a refugee. I was leaving as a woman who had regained control of her own life. While I was packing, I found a box with letters that Michael had written to me during our courtship more than 50 years ago. I read some of those letters and remembered the young, determined woman I had been back then, someone who made her own decisions and didn't let anyone look down on her. In one of the letters Michael had written to me, "Grace, what I love most about you is your inner strength. You are a woman who knows her worth and does not accept being treated with less respect than she deserves." Those words from Michael, written so many years ago, resonated in my heart as a confirmation that I was making the right decision. For the last few years, I had lost that inner strength. I had allowed circumstances and emotional dependence to turn me into a shadow of the woman I had been, but now I was regaining that strength. I was becoming the Grace that Michael had loved and respected again. At 2 p.m, I called a taxi to take me to my new apartment. I carried only 2 suitcases with my essential belongings and a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. Before leaving, I left a letter I had written that morning on the dining room table, addressed to Sarah and Charles. In that letter, I explained my decision clearly and definitively. "Dear Sarah and Charles," I had written, "after much reflection, I have decided to regain my independence and live alone again. During my stay in the hospital, I had time to think about my life and my future, and I realized that I am no longer happy living in this house. I have made the decision to exercise my right as the primary owner of this property and ask you to find another place to live. You have 30 days to make this transition, and I hope you can understand that this decision is final and irrevocable." I had also included in the letter all the necessary legal information, the official notification documents, and Mr. Miller's contact information in case they had questions about the process. I had tried to maintain a respectful but firm tone, without emotional explanations that could be interpreted as weakness or indecision. Along with the letter, I left my room keys and a special note for my grandchildren. "Dear Hannah and Robert," I wrote, "Grandma loves you very much and will always love you. This decision has nothing to do with you, but with Grandma's need to live in a way that makes her happy. You will always be welcome to visit me in my new home, and I hope you can understand that sometimes adults need to make important changes in our lives." The taxi ride to my new apartment was like a rebirth. As I watched the familiar streets of Denver go by, I felt like a completely new woman. I was no longer the lady who waited for permission to use the phone, who apologized for taking up space in the house, who accepted derogatory comments about her age and limitations. I was Grace Miller, a 73-year-old woman with her own resources, with her own place to live, and with the determination to never again let anyone treat her as if she were disposable. My new apartment welcomed me like a perfect refuge. It was small but very cozy, with lots of natural light and simple but elegant decor. The building had a 24-hour doorman, a small community garden, and several neighbors my age who seemed friendly and respectful. For the first time in years, I felt I was in a place where I could just be myself without having to adapt my personality to the expectations or annoyances of other people. During that first afternoon in my new home, I organized my belongings with a sense of peace I had forgotten existed. Every object I put in its place felt like an affirmation of my new independence. The photographs of Michael and me during our marriage on the living room table, my favorite books on the small bookshelf, my clothes in the closet, which was all mine. Everything was modest, but it was mine. And that ownership of my own space filled me with a deep satisfaction. Around 5 p.m, while I was having my first coffee in the small kitchen of my apartment, my phone started ringing insistently. It was Sarah, who had probably just gotten home and found my letter. I let it ring several times before deciding to answer. When I finally picked up the receiver, I heard my daughter's hysterical voice on the other end of the line. "Mom, what is this? What does this letter mean? Where are you? Charles and I are desperate. The children are crying. They don't understand what's happening. You have to come home immediately and explain to us what happened to you." Her tone of voice was exactly what Mr. Miller had predicted. Panic, denial, and attempts to make me feel guilty for my decision. But I was already prepared for that reaction. With a calm that surprised even me, I replied, "Sarah, I am fine, and I am exactly where I want to be. The letter explains everything clearly. I have decided to live independently, and you have 30 days to find another place to live." "But Mom," she shouted through the phone, You can't do this. This is our house. We've lived here for years. The children grew up here. You can't just kick us out as if we were strangers." The irony of her words did not go unnoticed by me. For months, she had been planning to kick me out of the same house, putting me in a nursing home against my will, but now that the tables had turned suddenly, the house was ours, and I had no right to make decisions about my own property. "Sarah," I said with a firmness I had been saving for years, "during my stay in the D hospital, I heard your conversation with the doctor. I heard when you said it would be a relief for everyone if I died. I also found you going through my personal documents, planning to take control of my life without my consent. You decided I was a heavy burden in your life, and now I have decided to free you from that burden forever." There was complete silence on the other end of the line, and I knew she knew exactly what I was talking about. She couldn't deny her words at the hospital. She couldn't pretend she hadn't been planning to put me in a nursing home. She couldn't pretend she had been treating me with the love and respect a mother deserves. "Mom," she finally said, with a much smaller voice, I didn't mean that. I was worried about your health. I was talking to the doctor about the best options for your care. You misunderstood everything. But I was no longer willing to accept excuses or justifications. Sarah, I'm not interested in explanations anymore. For years, I accepted being treated like a piece of furniture in that house. I accepted derogatory comments about my age. I accepted being ignored in family conversations. I accepted you making decisions about my future without consulting me. But I don't accept any of that anymore. Now I live alone, I manage my own resources, and I make my own decisions. The conversation continued for almost an hour, with Sarah alternating between pleas, threats, promises of change, and attempts at emotional blackmail using the grandchildren. But I held my position firm. The transformation that had begun in that hospital bed was complete. The submissive and accommodating woman had died forever, and in her place, someone had been born who would no longer negotiate her dignity for crumbs of family affection. When I finally hung up the phone, I sat in my new living room and watched the sunset through the window. For the first time in years, the silence of my own home didn't feel like loneliness, but like peace. Grace Miller had reclaimed her place in the world, and this time, no one could take it away from her. During the next 3 days after my move, my phone didn't stop ringing. Sarah called at all hours, alternating between desperate pleas, promises of change, legal threats, and attempts at emotional blackmail using my grandchildren. Charles also called me several times, trying to use a more reasonable and diplomatic tone, talking about family misunderstandings and the importance of resolving things like civilized adults. But I had already made my decision, and every call only confirmed that I had done the right thing. For years, I had been manipulated with the exact same tactics they were using now, making me feel guilty for thinking of myself, making me believe I was responsible for keeping the family together, making me feel selfish for wanting dignity and respect. The difference was that now I could clearly see these manipulations for what they really were. On the 4th day early in the morning, I heard someone knocking insistently on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole and saw Sarah standing in the hallway, her eyes red from crying and an expression of desperation I had never seen on her face. She was accompanied by Hannah and Robert, who looked confused and sad. For a moment, my heart wavered seeing my grandchildren, but I knew Sarah had brought them as an emotional strategy to make me change my mind. I opened the door, but I didn't invite them in. "Good morning," I said with distant courtesy. "How can I help you?" Sarah immediately began to speak rapidly, as if she were afraid I would close the door before she could say everything she had come to say. "Mom, please, you have to listen to me. I know I made mistakes. I know I didn't treat you as I should have, but we can fix everything. Charles and I have been talking, and we want to do things differently. Can you take the master bedroom? Can we put in the TV you like best? Can we fix the whole garden just the way you like it?" Hannah approached me with tears in her eyes. "Grandma, please come home. The house feels so empty without you. I miss your dinners. I miss you helping me with homework. I miss our talks at night. Mom says it was all a misunderstanding, that you can fix things." Robert, more timid, just looked at me with an expression that broke my heart. It was clear he didn't fully understand what was happening, but he knew something very important had changed in the family. "Grandma," he said in a small voice, "don't you love us anymore?" Those words from Robert almost broke me. I invited the three of them into my small living room and served them fresh water while I tried to organize my thoughts. I knew this conversation would be one of the most difficult of my life because I had to be honest without hurting my grandchildren, but I also had to be firm without letting them emotionally manipulate me. "Hannah, Robert," I said, sitting across from them, "I love you more than you can imagine. You are the most important things in my life, and that will never change. But sometimes adults need to make difficult decisions to be happy and well." Sarah interrupted immediately. "But Mom, if you come home, I promise everything will be different. I'll never suggest those nursing homes again. I'll never go through your papers without permission again. You'll have all the freedom you want. Just come back, please." I looked her directly in the eyes and asked, "Sarah, do you remember what you said to me in the hospital when you thought I was asleep?" Her face immediately turned pale, and I knew she knew exactly what I was referring to. "Do you remember when you told the doctor it would be a relief for everyone if I died?" The silence that followed was deafening. Hannah and Robert looked at their mother with shocked expressions. It was obvious they knew nothing about that conversation, and now they understood for the first time the real reason for my departure. It wasn't just the whim of an old woman, but the response to a deep and painful betrayal. "Mom, Sarah tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. "I was worried about your health. I was talking to the doctor about—" But she stopped because she knew there was no way to justify what she had said. "Sarah," I said with a calm that surprised me. "In 73 years of life, I've learned that the words we say when we think no one is listening are the ones that truly reveal what's in our hearts. In the hospital, when you thought I was asleep, you said exactly what you felt about me. And now that the consequences have arrived, you want to pretend it wasn't serious." Hannah looked completely devastated. "Mom," she said to Sarah, in a voice trembling with emotion, "did you really say that? About Grandma?" When Sarah couldn't answer, Hannah turned to me. "Grandma, I understand why you left. If my mom said that, then you had the right to leave." Robert, though younger, also seemed to be starting to understand the gravity of the situation. "Mom," he said to Sarah, "that was so mean. Grandma was always good to us." Seeing my grandchildren defend me against their own mother filled me with a bittersweet satisfaction. On one hand, it hurt to see the family divided this way. On the other hand, it reassured me to know that Hannah and Robert understood I hadn't abandoned them on a whim, but had been pushed to make this decision by their mother's cruel behavior. Sarah began to cry openly. "Mom, please forgive me. I know I said horrible things. I know I hurt you, but I was stressed. I was worried about so many things. Charles lost his job last month. We're having money problems. The kids need so many things. And I felt overwhelmed with everything." This new information took me by surprise. I didn't know Charles had lost his job. I didn't know they were having financial difficulties. During all those months, I had been contributing my pension to the family expenses. They had never mentioned financial problems to me. In fact, they had always acted as if my financial contribution was insignificant and hardly necessary. "When did Charles lose his job?" I asked with genuine curiosity. 6 weeks ago," Sarah admitted between sobs. "The company where he worked closed its Denver branch. We've been living on just my salary, and with the house expenses, the kids' schools, the car, it's very hard to make ends meet." Suddenly, many things started to make sense. The sudden rush to put me in a nursing home hadn't just been about getting rid of an annoying mother. It had also been a strategy to gain full control of the house and eliminate the need to keep pretending my presence was welcome. With Charles unemployed, my monthly pension had become even more important to the family economy, but they preferred to have access to that money without having to endure my physical presence. "Sarah," I said with a mixture of sadness and indignation, For 6 weeks you were having financial difficulties, and you never said anything to me. You continued to receive my monthly contribution, as if it were your right, but at the same time, you were planning to get rid of me. Don't you think that's deeply dishonest? Mom, Charles finally spoke from the doorway where he had been standing silently. We didn't want to worry you with our problems. We thought it was better to keep things normal while I found another job. Keep things normal, I repeated with a bitter smile. Would you call planning to put someone in a nursing home without consulting them, going through their personal documents behind their back, and wishing for their death to be free of them? Normal. Charles had no answer for that. The truth was they had seen my illness as a perfect opportunity to solve 2 problems at once. Get rid of a mother-in-law they considered a burden and maintain access to her financial resources through some kind of legal guardianship. Grandma, Hannah asked me timidly, could you forgive Mom if she really changes, if she promises never to say horrible things about you again? My granddaughter's question went straight to my heart. Hannah was old enough to understand the gravity of the situation, but also young enough to believe that all wounds can be healed with sincere apologies. I looked at her with all the love I felt for her and tried to explain something very difficult to understand. My love, I said, taking her hands in mine. There are words and actions that hurt so deeply that they change the relationship between people forever. What your mom said in the hospital and all the things she did during these months showed me that she truly feels I am a heavy burden in her life. Even if she apologizes now, and even if she promises to change, I can no longer live with the constant worry of bothering someone in my own home. Robert came over to me and hugged me tightly. Grandma, but can we visit you here? Can we come see you whenever we want? Of course, my love, I replied, returning his hug. This will always be your house, too. You can come whenever you want. You can stay over on weekends if you want. You can call me any time. The difference is that now Grandma lives in a place where she feels calm and happy. Sarah made one last desperate attempt. Mom, if it's about the money, if you need us to pay you rent to live in the house, we can do that. If you want us to sign some document that gives you more rights over family decisions, we can do that. Just tell us what you need to come back. I looked at her with a mixture of pity and firmness. Sarah, this isn't about money or legal documents. It's about dignity and respect. For years, you made me feel like an unwanted guest in a house I helped buy. You made me feel as if my presence was a constant bother, as if my opinions had no value, as if my only function was to contribute money and care without expecting anything in return. But can we change all that? She insisted desperately. Maybe you can, I replied, but I don't want to try anymore. I've discovered that I can be happy living alone, making my own decisions, organizing my time as I like. I've regained a peace I had lost for years. Why would I give up that peace to return to a situation that caused me so much sadness? The conversation continued for almost 2 more hours, but gradually Sarah began to understand that my decision was final and irrevocable. The 30-day legal notice was not a negotiation, but a courtesy I was giving them to get organized. There was nothing they could say or promise that would make me change my mind. When they finally left that afternoon, Hannah and Robert hugged me with promises to visit soon. Sarah left with an expression of total defeat, but also with something that seemed to be a delayed understanding of the consequences of her actions. Charles said nothing, but his expression showed the practical concern of a man who had just lost both a house and an important financial contribution. Over the next 3 weeks, I received occasional news about how their search for new housing was progressing. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that they had found a smaller apartment in a less expensive neighborhood, that Charles had found a temporary job with a lower salary than he had before, and that Sarah had had to take out a loan to cover the deposit and moving expenses. I didn't feel joy at their difficulties, but I didn't feel guilt either. They were simply the natural consequences of the decisions they had made. For years, they had built their lifestyle based on resources that were not entirely their own, and now they had to learn to live within their own means. On the 28th day of their legal notice, Sarah called me one last time. Her voice sounded tired, but resigned. "Mom," she said, "we finish moving our things out of the house tomorrow. I wanted to ask for your forgiveness one more time. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I've understood how much I hurt you and that I'm going to regret it for the rest of my life." "Sarah," I replied with a serenity that had taken me years to find, "I wish you the best in your new life. I hope this experience helps you to better value what you have and to treat the people who love you with more respect and consideration." "Is there any chance that one day you can completely forgive me?" she asked in a very small voice. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, nor does it mean trusting again as before." I explained, "I've already forgiven you, Sarah, because holding a grudge would only hurt me. But forgiving doesn't mean I'm willing to put myself back in a situation where I can be hurt in the same way." That was our last conversation as a mother and daughter who had lived together. Starting the next day, we would simply be two women related by blood and history, but no longer by the dependence and resentment that had characterized our last years of living together. On the morning of the 30th day from my apartment window, I saw the moving truck taking the last pieces of furniture from the house that had been my home for 5 years. I didn't feel sadness, but a sense of completely necessary closure. Grace Miller had regained not only her independence, but also her dignity and her right to be treated with respect by the people who supposedly loved her. 6 months have passed since I made the decision to leave Sarah and Charles's house to live my own life. During this time, I have learned to value the silence of my own company, the peace of making decisions without having to consult anyone, the freedom to organize my days according to my own will. Every morning I wake up in my small apartment and make my coffee without rushing, read the newspaper on my sunny balcony, and take care of the plants I bought to decorate my new home. It's incredible how simple and pleasant life can be when we don't have to constantly deal with the feeling of bothering someone. My daily routine has become a silent celebration of my recovered independence. I get up when my body naturally wakes, not when other people's alarm clocks determine it. I eat what I feel like for breakfast, not what someone else decided would be appropriate for my age. I go for a walk in the nearby park when I feel like it, not when someone else considers it safe for me. Every small decision, from what show to watch on television to what clothes to wear, feels like an affirmation of my right to exist on my own terms. I have rediscovered simple pleasures that I had forgotten during the years of forced cohabitation. In the afternoons, I sit on my balcony with a cup of tea and watch the children playing in the park across the street. Their laughter and happy screams fill me with a peace I hadn't felt in years. I don't feel envy for the families I see walking together, but a serene satisfaction in knowing that I also had those moments with Sarah when she was little, and that now I have something different, but equally valuable. The tranquility of a life lived on my own terms. One of the most beautiful things about this new stage has been rediscovering my own tastes and preferences. For years living in Sarah's house, I had adapted my habits to the family routines. I had modified my schedules to be useful without being annoying. I had silenced my own desires to maintain domestic harmony. Now I can listen to the music I like without worrying about bothering anyone. I can cook the dishes I crave without considering other people's tastes. I can decorate my space with the colors and objects that bring me joy. My small apartment has become a true reflection of who I am. I have filled the walls with photographs of Michael and me during our marriage, with images of Sarah when she was a child and I was the mother she needed, with drawings that Hannah and Robert have brought me during their visits. Every object has a personal meaning. Every corner tells a story that is uniquely mine. It is a space where I can be completely authentic, where I don't have to moderate my personality to please others or avoid conflicts. Sarah's calls have decreased considerably, especially after she understood that my decision was final and irrevocable. At first, during the first few weeks after her move, she called me frequently with problems with house documents, questions about items she had left behind, attempts to maintain some kind of connection that would allow her to believe the door was open for reconciliation. But gradually those calls became less frequent and more formal until they became sporadic contacts, mainly related to the children's visits. Through mutual acquaintances, I have learned fragments about how their adaptation to the new reality has been. Sarah and Charles moved to a considerably smaller apartment in a less expensive neighborhood of Denver. Charles found a job as an accountant in a small company with a salary that is about half of what he earned in his previous job. Sarah has had to work extra hours to compensate for the loss of income, and they have had to make significant adjustments to their lifestyle. They no longer have a cleaning lady. They have sold the newer car and kept only the older one. They have switched the children to public schools instead of the private ones where they studied before. This information doesn't bring me vindictive joy, but it also doesn't cause me guilt or remorse. They are simply the natural consequences of having built a lifestyle based on resources that were not completely their own. For years, they had depended on my financial contribution and my unpaid domestic work to maintain a standard of living that their own incomes could not support. Now they are learning to live within their true means, and although it is a painful lesson, it is a necessary one. The most comforting part of this new stage has been the development of my relationship with Hannah and Robert. My grandchildren visit me regularly, and those visits have become some of the most precious moments of my week. Without the constant tension of conflicting family coexistence, I can fully enjoy their company, and they can enjoy mine. We cook together in my small kitchen, do homework at my dining table, watch movies, snuggled on my sofa. These are moments of genuine connection, free from the complications and resentments that had poisoned our interactions when I lived in their house. Hannah, who is now 16, has matured a lot during these months. In our conversations, I can see that she understands more deeply the family dynamics that led to my departure. She has told me several times that she admires my courage to make such a difficult decision, and that she hopes to have the same strength when she has to make important decisions in her own life. It is comforting to know that my example of self-respect and self-determination is teaching her valuable lessons about the importance of not accepting to be treated with less dignity than she deserves. Robert, although younger, has also shown a surprising understanding of the situation. During one of his recent visits, he told me, "Grandma, I like that you smile more now. Before, when you lived with us, you looked sad sometimes, but now you always look happy." His words confirmed something I had suspected. My unhappiness during those last years of forced cohabitation had been more visible than I thought, and it had affected not only my own well-being, but also my grandchildren's perception of me. One Sunday afternoon, while Hannah and Robert were visiting me, I received an unexpected call. It was my sister Rose calling from Chicago with news that filled me with immense joy. Her youngest daughter, Patricia, had gotten engaged, and the wedding would be in 2 months. Rose was inviting me to stay with her for a week to participate in all the preparations and the celebration. "Grace," Rose told me enthusiastically, "I want you to come not just as a guest, but as the matriarch of the family that you are. Patricia has always admired you very much, and it would be an honor for us to have you here during these special moments." The invitation filled me with an excitement I hadn't felt in years. For a long time, I had forgotten that I was part of a larger family that valued and respected me. The prospect of traveling to Chicago, of participating in a joyous family celebration, of being treated as the beloved aunt and grandmother I truly was, made me feel as if I were rediscovering a part of myself that had been dormant. When I told Hannah and Robert about the wedding invitation, their reactions were completely different from what I would have received back when I lived with Sarah. Instead of worries about my ability to travel alone, or comments about the risks of a person my age making independent plans, my grandchildren showed genuine enthusiasm for my adventure. "That's so exciting, Grandma," Hannah told me. "It's going to be wonderful for you to see the whole family and be part of the wedding." "Do you already know what dress you're going to wear?" Robert added. "Grandma, you have to take lots of pictures and show them to us when you get back." Their reactions confirmed something very important. When people treat us with respect and trust, we flourish. When they treat us as if we are fragile and incapable, we become fragile and incapable. My grandchildren, by seeing me as an autonomous and capable person, were helping me feel exactly that way. In the weeks leading up to the trip, I dedicated myself to preparing everything with a care and excitement that reminded me of when I was young and planned vacations with Michael. I bought a new dress for the wedding, updated my travel suitcase, organized my documents, and made all the necessary arrangements to be away from home for a week. Every step of the preparation filled me with a deep satisfaction because it was something I was doing completely by myself and for myself. The day before my departure, as I was packing my things, I reflected on everything that had changed in my life during these 6 months. The woman who had left that hospital bed pretending to be sicker than she was. The woman who had heard her own daughter wish for her death. That woman was gone forever. In her place, someone had been born who knew exactly what she was worth and was not willing to accept less respect than she deserved. It had not been an easy process. There had been lonely nights when I had wondered if I had made the right decision. There had been moments of doubt when I had considered if I wasn't being too hard on Sarah. There had been days when I missed the familiarity of the shared domestic routine, even when that routine had been poisoned by resentment and disrespect. But every time those doubts arose, I remembered the conversation I had overheard in the hospital. I remembered the way I had been treated during those last months of living together. I remembered the feeling of being seen as a burden instead of a blessing. And then I knew with absolute certainty that I had made the only decision that would allow me to maintain my dignity and my peace of mind. That night, my last night before the trip to Chicago, I sat on my favorite balcony and watched the lights of Denver spread out before me. It was the city where I was born, where I had married Michael, where I had raised Sarah, where I had built my entire life. But now, it was also the city where I had learned to value myself, where I had regained my independence, where I had decided that I deserved to be treated with love and respect. I took my notebook where I had been writing my reflections on this new stage of my life during these months, and I wrote one last entry before closing this chapter and starting the next. At 73, I have learned that it is never too late to demand the respect we deserve. I have learned that true love does not require us to sacrifice our dignity, and I have learned that sometimes the greatest act of self-love is simply having the courage to leave when we are no longer valued where we are. I put the notebook in my suitcase, smiled to myself, and whispered quietly the words that had become my personal mantra. Sometimes the greatest new beginning is the silence we choose to keep. Elderly Stories is curious to know how far this story reached. Where are you watching from? Comment below.